We welcome you to D2EastHoops.org 2016-2017 women's basketball season preview of the Northeast 10 Conference. Alongside Steve Zerdellian and Chris Granozio, I'm Tim McCaffrey. Don Familo producing the program. Let's preview the Northeast 10 Northeast Division, where the gold standard of coaches is Barb Stevens, Women's Basketball Hall of Famer, 29-6 last season, and another trip to the Final Four, Steve.
The Bentley Falcons only were beaten by Lubbock Christian, the undefeated national champions a year ago, and the Falcons are the prohibitive favorite in the Northeast 10. All-American forward Jen Gemma had a terrific season last year, 20 points and 9 boards a game. She leads the way, but for Bentley, there's a key player missing this year. Freshman Megan Lewis was outstanding down the stretch a year ago and arguably was the key factor for them winning the regional. She's going to miss this year with a knee injury, and so that might change the dynamics a little bit for the Falcons.
Yeah, players like Lauren Green and Victoria Lux and Mackie Smith will all return, but they might have to carry a little bit more of the load. They do lose Jane White and Kristen Brown, but overall, these are still the team. These are the players that make up the Bentley Falcons, and they are still the team to beat in the region.
Yeah. And the depth for Bentley will be a key here, and they've got some freshmen who may be able to contribute, a couple of wing players and somebody in the post as well. So we'll see how the dynamic fits. And Bentley has had an interesting last couple of years. Remember, 2014 they were the national champions, and then in 2015 suffered a rare losing year. Last year they felt like they were sort of ahead of schedule in winning the NE10 in the regional, but Bentley fans will tell you they're back to where they belong.
Bentley currently ranked number one in the D2 bulletin, and more of the same expected for the Falcons come this season. First trip to the NCAAs for St. Anselm since 1999, the 18-10 squad, led by Julie Plant. Can they duplicate last season's success, Steve?
Well, I don't see why not. The only issue here might be that they did lose Sam Novonley, who transferred out, but a lot of key players coming back. Candace Andrews, a live wire guard, Caitlin Abella, Allie Glennon, and Kayla Duarte. Also back for the Hawks. What's interesting for them, Chris, is that they're in a position where now they're coming off a winning season and they're expected to do well, whereas last year they were lying in the weeds a little bit before the season started.
It's a whole different outlook when people are expecting you to be good and you have a target on your back in a way. And also, for the first time now in a couple of years, there's no threat of possibly going down to D3. And now they can just focus on D2. Recruiting will be a little bit more solid, and they can focus on their future. And this still could be a team that is vying for an NCAA tournament bid.
The Assumption Greyhounds finished 15-12 last season, but I think Kerry Fair, considering they had a couple of really nice wins, was disappointed with her team's performance by the end of the season.
Probably they feel like maybe they left the chips on the table a little bit. They've sort of hit a glass ceiling some years where they'll get to the mid-teens in wins, but not take that jump to the next step. They do have 7 of their top 8 scorers from a season ago back in uniform, and that's a good thing. Guards Allison Stoddard and Kelly Carey will carry the load for the Greyhounds. They'll be a good team. The question is if they can really string it together and not have those down moments during the season.
Yeah, Kelly Conley is their most notable key loss from last season's 15-12 team, but Assumption always a formidable foe and very well coached.
The Stonehill Skywalks, led by Trisha Brown, winning record last year at 15-14. In this season, they do return Kelly Martin, so big things might be expected from the Skyhawks this year.
For me, I'm a big fan of Kelly Martin. She's one of the players I love to watch most in the region. I mean, she's a lefty guard, but she scores, she creates, she rebounds, she's a good defender. She's just all over the stat sheet, averaged 15 points a game last year, and this is really her team now. But there are other players who are going to have to take on bigger roles, and Mati Diabate, Samantha Heislip, and Courtney Walsh are the players that really are in the crosshairs here for the Skyhawks. The loss of Paige Marshall and Shannon Brown, 2 quality players, are going to be noticed for Stonehill. But if they can add some freshmen into the mix and add some athleticism, I think we could be looking at a pretty good Stonehill team.
Thanks for staying with us on D2EastHoops.org. As we continue with the Northeast Division of the Northeast 10 Conference, Franklin Pierce, new head coach this year. Some really good success over the last few years for Franklin Pierce, but last year they struggled to a 14-13 record.
And unfortunately for Raven fans, they're losing 2 key players, Kara Charette, who averaged 18 points a game last year, and Natalie Bastian, who averaged 13 a game last year, have departed. And they don't have a lot in terms of returning numbers coming back. And with the new head coach, Jeanette Weedo, it's going to be interesting to see how they develop. It's going to be, I don't want to say it's a new team because they have a number of returnees, Chris, but it's going to be a very different look for the Ravens.
It's a restart for them for sure, especially with a new head coach. It looks like a rebuilding year for them, those losses that you mentioned, but also Jasmine Fogel coming back as their leading returning scorer, and Gemma Thacker just behind her. Both average just under 8 points a game, and they'll be looked at to take on bigger roles this season.
A team that's in transition, the Warriors from Merrimack, 13-14 a year ago. But the NE10 punishes youth, and there's a lot of youth at Merrimack.
They're pretty young, only 4 upperclassmen among their 14 players. But there's talent here. That's the one thing I like about Merrimack. Among the returnees, not big numbers. Myasia Alston, averaging a little over 7 points a game, is the most productive returnee. But there are some other good players there in Lexi Martin and Hannah Neal. They've got some good youngsters in as well. So Monique LeBlanc's team here could be a team that might find a spark as the season goes along. They did go 13-14 last year, and despite the losses, I think they could be around the same area. They
lost their top 4 scorers from last year, but it was a very balanced offense. Nobody really averaged double figures on this team, so I think you lose your top scorers, but you still have quite a bit coming back. And, yeah, you said there's a lot of talent here and certainly room to grow.
Karen Pinko's Southern New Hampshire squad concluded at 14-13 this season, and last season, up, down, about the same this year for Southern.
Well, we'll see. I mean, last year was both, really. They started the season out 8-0, and they looked like they had finally cracked the code to being a team that could contend in the league and maybe the region. But things kind of hit a wall, and they only won 5 games after Christmas. Now, the plus side here, Chris, is that they've got a lot of proven players back, and they went through the ups and downs last year, and you can only hope that experience will help their consistency this time around.
Kylie Lorenzen is the key returner, averaging 12 points a game last year. Also, Sarah Ryan, Catherine Stinson, Brianna Camara are also back in key roles. They only lose Erin Doherty.
Yeah, and Lorenzen was Northeast 10 Rookie of the Year a season ago, and she'll be looked at to be one of the better players in the league this year.
The team that held up the rest of the Northeast 10 Conference Northeast Division last year was St. Michael's. Can they escape the basement this season, Steve?
They could. One thing that's going to be a problem for them is their inside depth. They lose Mackenzie Baroud, who averaged 14.5 points and 10 rebounds a game. She was a very underrated player, did a lot both inside and out for the Purple Knights. But they've got some good guards back in Leah Spencer and Indira Evora, averaging 12 and 10 points a game last year, respectively. So if they can create some depth and get some more inside play, especially from the likes of Samantha Delaney, then there's a chance that they could bump that win total up by a few.
5 freshmen could help the cause for head coach Shannon Kynock. So they're a little thin, but they still have some room to take some strides.
Sometimes the Northeast 10 conference divisions are like a snow globe. You shake them up, and one year a team finishes first, and the next year they might be all the way on the other side, and that looks like it could be the case this year in the Northeast 10 Southwest Division. Alongside Steve Zerdelian and Chris Granozio, I'm Tim McCaffrey, Don Familo on the controls. Glad you've joined us on D2EastHoops.org. Last season in the Southwest Division, it was AIC, the Yellow Jackets, 26-6, winning the league. This season, what do you have? What do you say, Steve?
They had a really good season a year ago. I think a lot better than they expected to have. But there's a big but here, is that they did lose a lot of players. Brianna Bishop averaged 14 a game and was one of the best perimeter players in the league. But there were a lot of other quality players, Chris. Ebony Easter, Kamika Mason, Sydney Tepley, all solid, experienced players depart. They do have Dana Watts back, who I had a really good freshman season a year ago. But 26 wins, I'm not sure that they're going to hit that this year.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough call to match that number. But Kristen Hutchinson, very good coach, an underrated coach, great player when she was suited up for the Yellow Jackets. And I think despite those major losses, there's still a solid talent level, and they could be a competitor in that Southwest Division.
Yeah, Amani Stepney and Jada Gilmore among the players who are going to have to assume larger roles. They lost in the NE10 championship last year to Bentley, and they nearly knocked off the Falcons in their own building, and then they lost a heartbreaker in the regional semifinals against NYIT. So there's a little bit of unfinished business there. The question is, do they have the ammunition to achieve the goals. We'll have to see.
Southern Connecticut State, the Owls 19-11 a season ago. In her second season, Kate Lynch, and this is somebody you think has a nice future as a head coach.
She had a great career as a player, that's for sure. Won a national championship, was the all-time leading scorer at Southern Connecticut. Did sort of an apprenticeship at a couple of other schools before coming back to her alma mater. I think she's a very, very talented young coach, and she's got a pretty good squad here. They did lose a couple of productive players in Jackie Bethea and Danielle Powell, but there's still talent back, Chris, and I think Kate Lynch has a way of molding that talent and really bringing the group together.
Yeah, and tops on that list coming back are Taylor McLaughlin, who averaged 11 points a game last year. Also, Maria Wesley with 8.5 points a game. Paige Decker, also a solid contributor for the team. So despite their big losses, they have a strong nucleus coming back, and I think they can build on that under Lynch's tutelage.
It's the McLaughlin group at Southern Connecticut. The next team from last season, they finished third tied for third in a three-way tie. The New Haven Chargers, 15-13 a season ago, but they're in this center mix of teams in the Southwest Division of the NE10 that could go just about any way.
Here's the issue for New Haven. The NE10 is going to need to find new stars because not that many of their top players are back from last year. Only 3 of the top 10 players are back. And when you look at teams that had heavy graduation losses, I'm looking right at the Chargers. Brianna Bradford averaged 19 a game. Lauren Hebert averaged 15.5 a game, and they're both gone. I mean, that's a huge part of the offense for UNH. And LaTanya Watson, now in her second year, is going to have to turn to some other players that had good seasons last year, but are they capable of being those primary scorers?
Yeah, and among those are Alexandria Kerr, India Dotson, and also Quanah Smith. They all average between 8.5 9 points per game, and they're going to be expected to step up if they're going to continue the success at UNH.
Gina Castelli's Lemoyne Dolphins squad hasn't been able to turn the corner in the last few seasons. 13-14 a year ago. A lot of key losses, a lot of points off the basketball floor for the Dolphins. But you just don't know with them this season because of the JUCO transfers they bring in.
Yeah, we've heard this story before. In fact, we just talked about it with New Haven in terms of key losses. And for Lemoyne, it's Vandale Andrade and Maggie Brown are the big losses, almost 27 points a game between the pair. They've got some returnees who were in the rotation but not primary players. So, Chris, yeah, there's going to be a heavy load on some newcomers and for some of the returnees to be more prominent.
Just one key senior on the roster, Alea Demand, returns at point guard. Also, Madison Purcell and Courtney Webster are expected to improve their roles upon after last season. And also amongst some of the newcomers is one of the top high school players in New York State, and Michaela Roberts. She'll be looked at to be a key player at the point guard position.
This is D2EastHoops.org. We continue with the Northeast 10 Southwest Division season preview. A season ago, St. Rose looked like they were a lock for the NCAA tournament, but they didn't win a game in the last month, 6 weeks of the season. Boy, did they end poorly. And where do they go from this year? Can they flip the script in the positive direction?
Oh, they're going to have to do it quickly. They lost their last 8 games last season. Their last win was January 23rd. So for Karen Haig, they've got to wipe that slate clean to move forward. On the plus side, they do have some good players back who have experienced success, with Stacey Barrett and Taylor Nazon in particular, both averaging about 12 a game, and Carissa Birthright is back as well. So there's definitely ammunition to work with for the Golden Knights. They do lose a couple of key players, including Keontae Williams, but sometimes things linger at the end of a season, and they're going to have to get over that hump pretty quickly and forget about the end of last season.
A team that doesn't have to worry about losing their leading scorers, Adelphi, new head coach, but should be some of the same old success for the Panthers.
I think Adelphi is going to have a pretty good season last year. They did win 18 games a year ago, and back are Sierra Clark, who averaged 13.5 a game, and Callie Balfour averaged 10.5 a game. Those two are very talented players. They did lose some solid contributing players like Ashley Gomez, Samantha Brenner, and Lauren Nuss. But they have a new head coach in Missy Traversi, who has had a great college career at the University of Maine. She's had some other stops prior to arriving at Adelphi and has done very well there. So I expect Adelphi to be a very good team. They'll definitely be in the mix for the Southwest Division crown. They just need to develop a little depth. They have the material to do it. The question is, how quickly does it pull together?
Carrie Seymour, one of the region's winningest coaches, they're her pace setters have fallen on hard times in the recent years. An 11-17 finish might have been a little better than they deserved a year ago. This season, expected to be better, but just how much better, Steve?
Well, they should be better. The thing about the Southwest Division is it's so competitive from top to bottom, and that snow globe effect that you mentioned, Tim, that's real in this division. But a number of the teams in this division have lost their top 2 or 3 scorers. Pace hasn't. Gabriella Rubin and Kristen Dodge are back. Dodge is a deterrent in the paint. Jacqueline Oskam is back as well. Solid core here for the setters. The depth is something that's in question. They're going to have to improve that, and I think they're going to have to improve the approach, the mentality, because they've sort of beaten themselves in some ways in the last couple of years. But Carrie Seymour has a way of recovering from a couple of down years to have really strong seasons. I'm looking at Pace as a team that I think some may overlook, but they could be pretty good if it all fits in.
Yeah, Pace is one of those teams that always plays hard, whether they have the talent or not. And they lose Shanice Maynard, Rachel Dorsch, and Uni Scher, among others. But I still think that Pace could be good because Carrie Seymour always works them, and they always she gets the most out of her team. And they could be a surprise this year.
A really disappointing season from a macro perspective for the NE10 last season. Only 3 teams made the NCAA tournament, and I know that sticks in their craw from last year. Steve, moment of truth. Who's in the big dance at the end of the season this year?
Well, I think it's not so. It's interesting when you mentioned that fact about only 3 NCAA tournament teams. 2 things here. Number one is that the NE10 is so competitive that they eat their young. In essence, they beat up on each other. So it's hard to have 3 or 4 teams that just lap the field and have big numbers. Number 2 is you have to give credit to the other conferences, the ECC and the CACC. They have improved. And so that balances the region, which is really good news for everybody across the board. Getting back to your question, Bentley's at the top right now, and teams are chasing them. St. Anselm, maybe at least going into the season, might have a half step on some of the other teams in the division, but Assumption, Stonehill, and Southern New Hampshire are right there with them, and they could easily take a jump past them. The Southwest, really interesting. AIC, Adelphi, Southern Connecticut are 3 that might be, for me, at least at the beginning, a cut above, but I wouldn't look past Pace and St. Rose if they can get themselves going early and gain some positive momentum that they could be teams in the mix. So to me, you're looking at 8 or 9 teams here who could be in the reckoning when it all comes to the end of the season.
I'd say a team to watch would be AIC, just because I love what they've done in recent years, and I think Kristen Hutchinson is a terrific coach, and I think she and Kate Lynch, who both played for their respective schools, are doing a great job, and I think those 2 teams right now are a couple of clubs that could be much improved and could make some waves in March.
That wraps it up for us here on the 2016-2017 Northeast 10 Conference Women's Basketball Season Preview on d2easthoops.org. Check out some of our other previews on this website, and stay tuned for more information right here on d2easthoops.org. For Chris Granozio and Steve Zerdelian and manning the controls, Don Familo, I'm Tim McCaffrey. Thank you so much for joining us.